1971, Greenville, South Carolina.
Yeah.
ABC.
Yeah.
Flag to flag.
Yep.
Good afternoon. This is Jim McKay. I don't know what you're doing on this Easter Saturday afternoon, but in Greenville, South Carolina, a capacity crowd of about 15,000 people is about to watch the Grand National 100-mile NASCAR stock car race.
How did that race come about?
ABC was willing to take the chance way back, and most of them were total disasters.
There you see the crowd in the background of the young lady standing there.
Jim McKay did them, and thank God it was Jim, because he was so good. But they would be runaways over and over again.
In the pits, Whitney and Leroy Yarborough. And Leroy, we've got a situation developing here.
And that one in particular was one where they had a light field. They only had 16 or 17, and at the last moment, somebody got the K&K car.
Bobby Isaac.
Bobby Isaac.
Yeah.
And Bobby Isaac showed up, and he stunk up the show.
There is Victory Lane. Ken Squier is down there. I can't see whether he has Bobby Isaac with him. Okay, Ken, go ahead.
Victory Lane, and it is a harmonious group around Bobby Isaac. Delighted to see him here, fourth time in a row, Bobby. Congratulations on a great run.
Well, thank you, Ken, and my car did work real good.
As far as I was concerned, that was quite an experiment, and the equipment was bulky and heavy and difficult, but they soldiered on.
You know, I look at that race. That 71 race is a race that not a lot of people even remember. Do you know what I mean? I mean, everybody
What do you mean?
points
It was on TV.
Everybody points to 70. Everybody points to 79.
Yeah.
But that race and what ABC did by stepping out on that limb, and as you said, some of it was a disaster. But if we go and we fast forward to the end of that decade, CBS says we'll do the Daytona 500, flag to flag.
Live from Daytona Beach, Florida, a CBS Sports Special, the 1979 Daytona 500.
You were a huge part of that.
Well, I knew some folks because I was working at CBS then. And I guess I was part of the entertainment part of the sports thing. You know, I went to Spivey's Corner for the hollering contest and went out to California and did the frog jumping and certain things.
So major events.
Yeah, major events.
Major events.
As far as I was concerned,
Yes.
they were real events that
Yes.
mattered to Americans. And that's what stock car racing did. It mattered to Americans. Didn't exactly ring the bell on Fifth Avenue, but the opportunity to say, guys, you know, there's something else going on in this country and you ought to take a look, because there's hundreds of these little tracks all over the United States. That caught on. They saw those crowds that France was putting together. And through the 70s, that Daytona 500, year after year, consistently grew more of the drama, more of the adventure.
As they come to the stripe, the winner is car number 21.
And they got it. Then they were willing to go out and do it right.
I mean, there was a buzz in the garage area. I was 18 years old, but we all knew this is a game changer. Worked on my dad's car and clear coated it, shine. I mean, it's going to be on TV, man. This is going to be big. You talk about CBS doing it right. Was there pressure? Was anybody's job on the line if this fell through? Was it that type of, man, I'm going into this, I've sold this, and not only you, but the other guys that were a part of it?
The biggest problem was the weather. A lot of us were thinking, boy, we've really hung it out here. And there was some consideration back in New York. Well, if this is going to get rained out, what the hell have we bought here? As it worked out, as France Sr. told us, the sun was going to shine at any moment, and the sun shone over. It was unbelievable. And we got it going about an hour late.
The Goodyear blimp is up. Everything's beginning to look good. The sun is coming out. Bill France weather.
Obviously, you're the guy. You're the guy in the booth. What do you remember about how the race itself played out? Did it build to that crescendo that it was?
It did. It built to a crescendo over and over again.
Yes.
Two of the major principals took each other down in turn one, landed out there in the mud, and went a couple of laps down. Donnie Allison, who had to do anything he could to get his reputation up to that of his brother.
How big was the snowstorm in the Northeast for viewership for CBS?
I never asked. I knew that
Yeah.
nobody at home could get out of the
Yes,
house
exactly.
up here in Vermont. As far as I was concerned, the way that, as you explained, it kept developing all day. And all of a sudden, you had this new kid out there, Earnhardt.
Yes.
Young Dale Earnhardt hitching his wagon to the star of Richard Petty as he tries to win the Daytona 500.
And here was another representative of what this sport was. He finally had a good car, and he wouldn't give it up.
79, it would build up, and then it would do this, and then it would build up, and then it would do this. And then we get to the end of the 79 race. And Donnie and Cale. And take us through that lap, because your call is one of the most iconic calls played over and over and over to describe this sport.
It's all come down to this. Where will Cale make his move? He comes to the inside. Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides.
I never felt very good about that because I thought there was so much, and when I saw it again, when the show was over, I thought, Jesus, I missed so much. And yet, it's all there.
Yes, it is.
It didn't need anything. You could have done it without talk. When those two went down the backstretch, there was no question. There was no lift. One or the other was probably going to end up in the fence, and they both did. And then, you know, and the story, and this may not be true, but the story was that the guys back there in third, fourth, and fifth, Waltrip, AJ, and Richard.
Yes.
Richard was right there,
Yes.
and they're 25 seconds back. I mean,
Yes.
it was a big gap.
Big gap.
And one of the crises in that race was that there was another Petty painted car in the darn race.
Buddy Arrington.
Buddy Arrington. Buddy Arrington was out there, and he was doing the job as good as he could.
Yes.
And everybody's fishing around because we've just demolished the two principals in the event. And they started to zoom in on Buddy Arrington. I take some pride in the fact I said, and the leaders are now in the back straightaway.
In the backstretch are the leaders. Watching for the leaders to, they're still up in turns 3 and 4. The leaders are up in turns 3 and 4.
And so they got it.
Yeah.
And then they got this, and the other part of that story was, and this isn't alleged, with about 10 laps to go, those four are running nose to tail. And AJ said to somebody on the radio, what's the difference between third and sixth? And they said, I don't know, maybe $1,500. He said, oh, hell. And he stayed right where he was.
Right where he was.
Right where he was. And in the rocking chair was Waltrip.
Yeah.
And there was Petty out in front.
Yeah.
And down they came, three of them, just flying.
Yeah.
To the checkered flag.
Yeah.
At the line, Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it.
To me, every time I see it, the part that always fascinates me, and there's a fight. Boom.
And there's a fight between Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison. The tempers overflowing.
When that fell into CBS's lap, what were you thinking in the booth at that time?
I had a partner named T-Bone Curley, and he and I had built Thunder Road up, and he'd go down and he was willing to work in the truck, and it gets down to this finish, and here's Richard Petty coming home first, and the race is over, and it's an hour and a half or 2 hours later, and they were trying to get it boxed up and put away.
A $60,000 car becoming a 22-passenger school bus.
Somebody said, okay, let's take the blimp down. We won't need it anymore. And Tom Curley said, leave the blimp, and he didn't have any reason to say anything. He's just a spotter, really, the producer. Said, leave that camera up. So they did, right? And sure enough, the Allison brothers got together, and as you recall, It was Cale who tried to hit Allison with his nose, and we had a confrontation went on out there. Yeah, that's the story. And but it was by chance and Bagori that they got it, and after it was over, and everybody is taking a deep breath and dropping their shoulders, and Michael Pearl turned to Tom Curley and said, "Why the hell did you ever tell us to leave that camera up?" And he said, "Well," he said, "you know those two guys, they're both short trackers." And they were. Yes. And actually there was the three of them, because Bobby just stopped to give his brother a ride back.
We're sitting here at WDV. You've never retired.
No.
You've never retired.
No, and I intend to die right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I look back at this sport. You were there at huge moments in this sport. You are not only a Squier Hall Award winner, you're a Hall of Fame member.
You, as well as anyone, remember that when those judges were sitting in those rooms, I was against it, because I totally believed that those awards in the Hall of Fame should be for those who sat in those cars, whether it was you, your father, your grandfather, cousins, relatives, people you didn't know, but who stuck it in there like Marvin Panch. The fact that they named an award in the memory of Barney and myself was pretty special. And I didn't think we deserved very much more, because the ones that did are the ones that you and I both know that will never be remembered. And they're the core of what made stock car racing great. And the young people today, getting into all of these game things to get it done, didn't know the dues that you paid. And although it's become somewhat commercially contrived, it's, you know, there was a time you would talk in this game about Rowdy. Rowdy could be verbally, or it could be with knuckles.
Yeah.
That's gone. But that spirit was all part of NASCAR, all part of what was developed in the beginning. And I'm sorry that we're missing that. And I'm sorry for these kids today, because they have no idea. You're right on the cusp of understanding what it was and what it drove it forward. And so many today, I truly think they give it up. And therefore, the kids that are climbing with just their fingertips and their toes 5,000 feet up. Now, if you really want to challenge yourself, that's a heck of a way to do it. I think they put such emphasis on how safe it is.
Yeah.
It never was safe. It never will be safe. But don't shove it down my throat. Now, let me ask you a question, and I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm always shocked by the petty attitude when things go awry.
Yeah.
And nothing went further awry than when you lost your son.
Yes.
And you maintained your dignity, and you didn't blame anyone, nor did your father. But that's the difference between those other major league sports. Where we go from here is the only question.
It's the only question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what do you have to say about it?
Well, and this is what I do have to say about it. I have always, and we have always, you're up here in Vermont.
Yeah.
And Vermonters you just have a way of life and a certain way of living and a certain way of looking at things. So do people if you're from the rural South and you grew up in the country and farm communities. And you know what? If it didn't rain and the crops weren't good, you didn't close up the shop. You didn't shut down the farm. You had to keep farming. And for us, my grandfather raced, my father raced, I raced, and Adam came along and raced. And the sport, just as you, has been so good to us that you couldn't blame the sport. You'd seen it happen before. You talk about in the 60s, you talk about in the 70s and 50s. You knew that was part of the sport. You knew that every day you put on a helmet and strapped in. You knew it hits a little bit closer to home when it's your son. But at the same time, farmers don't blame the farm. They don't blame the soil. They don't blame that. They just keep doing it. So that's kind of the way we looked at it. And I'm going to beg to differ with you on one thing, where you said the Hall of Fame was for guys that got out there and got it done. And without Ken Squier, the legend of Junior Johnson, who Richard Petty was and became, who Dale Earnhardt was, I would argue your point and say Ken Squier was just as instrumental in building those American heroes.
Instrumental is the right word. I didn't pull the trigger.
Yeah.
You did.
I got one last question for you.
Okay.
You know, we're sitting here at WDEV. This is where you started.
Radio Free Vermont.
Radio Free Vermont. But my question is, once a radio man, always a radio man.
Yeah. Well, I'm blessed. I'm blessed because I'm in the little town in which I was born. You know that old, I think it was Marty that did that song about the thing that keeps us going are the good folks in the last town that we played.
Yeah.
That's what's so special about coming back on a day that's 3 below up here in Vermont and thinking about how really blessed I was to get to know the kind of people that I wanted to be associated with. Yeah, they may not be perfect, but they're pretty damn close.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Okay.
I appreciate it, Ken.
Hey NASCAR fans, thanks for checking out the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Make sure you hit subscribe below for the latest NASCAR news, race highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.